Welcome to Inside Analog Photography Radio Program. I'm your host, Scott Shepard, and of course, the Inside Analog Photography Radio Program is all about traditional process photography. We talk about instant photography. We talk about black and white. We talk about color film. We talk about dry plate, wet plate, you name it, alternate printing processes, everything going on in analog photography. And of course, the Inside Analog Photography Radio Program is brought to you by Fujifilm over at www.fujifilmusa.com/professional. They have beautiful C41 color neg, black and white, color chrome, and of course, instant. Instant film rocks. These guys have so much great things going on right now with instant film. Of course, they have the pack film in 3 1/4 by 4 1/4 and 4 by 5, color, black and white, high-speed black and white, but you know what's even cooler? They have the Instax cameras and film. The Instax Wide is in the country, available everywhere, and of course, right now, brand new, the Instax Mini is now in the U.S. They have cameras, they have film. This Instax Mini is 2.5 by 3.5. It's the size of a business card. This is really fun stuff. You got to check it out. www.fujifilmusa.com/professional, making life more colorful. Our friends at Richard Photo Lab, the place to send all your film to get developed, proofs, you name it. They got a great workflow going. www.richardphotolab.com, DR5, for the most unbelievable proprietary process to turn your black and white film into positives, into chrome. You won't believe until you get your film back as a piece of chrome. Will blow your mind. The dynamic range, the latitude, it's just unbelievable stuff. Definitely check it out. www.dr5.com. Iger Studios, Lenny Iger, the place to have high-resolution scans done. You know, a lot of people now are shooting analog. They're using a high-resolution scan. They're making digital negatives on an inkjet, or maybe they're going straight to an inkjet output, but they're making digital negatives and they're printing contact prints. They're doing all the stuff you need to get a high-resolution scan. They're using an Aztec Premier, 8,000 PPI, adjustable aperture. They can give you scans that are basically grain-free. They can adjust it for every kind of film out there. This is crazy stuff going on with Lenny Iger and the guys at Iger Studios. Check them out, igerstudios.com. And of course, Upstrap at upstrap-pro.com. The camera strap that will not slide off your shoulder. Our media partners, www.apug.org, the Analog Photography User Group, the place on the web for all things analog process. This is a great place to learn, to share information, to get tips and tricks. The community for analog photography, www.apug.org, and of course, our photographic philanthropy partner, George Eastman House International Museum of Photography and Film, www.geh.org, the place to go to find out about the history of traditional analog photography. These people are keeping this alive. They have over 7,000 cameras in their museum of everything that's ever been made, including the Hasselblads that were shot on the moon. You name it. They have the collection. This is a great way to help support. You can be a member of George Eastman House organization. They have a lot of great things going on, but this is something you can do to help give back to photography, to help keep traditional analog photography alive for generations to come. Definitely check them out, www.geh.org. We got a great show lined up for everybody today. We're going to have with us Todd Rafalovich. Todd is a professional wedding and portrait photographer out of the San Francisco Bay Area in California. Been shooting for many, many decades. An avid film user. Shoots a little digital, but everybody's doing that these days. But you know, his main work, what really counts when he shoots, is film. He shoots the most precious moments on film. A lot of cool stuff that Todd's up to. And we're going to talk to Todd today about himself, his photography, how he got into this, and what he's using for his gear. Todd, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us here on Inside Analog Photo, and really cool to feature you today on the program. Your beautiful photography. I know you do great wedding work. You do a lot of portrait, some fashion, travel, a lot of great stuff. And I guess the main point is you love to capture your images on film.
I do. Wouldn't change it for the world. I shoot some digital. I think it has its place in time, but when it comes down to critical imagery, my own stuff, weddings, the critical imagery, it's all analog.
That's the thing is, with you incorporating the digital in your work, do you find that your film capture is eventually, I guess, output through a digital device like a digital LED printer, like a Fuji Frontier or a Durst or some kind of light jet? Or do you keep your analog completely analog from capture to finish?
Well, I have everything scanned. I think one of the wonderful things that occurred over the last several years is you can still have the beauty of analog and the convenience of digital. So I have everything scanned. Even some of my travel photography, Africa, Morocco, etc., I may shoot that medium format film and just do a really, really high-res scan and print from the actual scan. So it's kind of a hybrid, though the original imagery itself is analog. I think, again, it's wonderful to be able to share imagery in so many different ways now, especially with the weddings. It used to be traditionally just a wedding book. That was a great archival piece, and that's one of the main presentations, but now people share imagery online. Having the scans is wonderful. I think it's one thing that confuses people a little bit is that doing the scans, they think, okay, well, why are you shooting film in the first place? And you have to remind them that digital is a bunch of ones and zeros and film is film. They are going to be different, and my preference is for film. Even if it's digitized, you still have that natural integrity of the film for the original image, and that's what really makes a difference.
So let's step back and talk about when did you get the bug for photography? You've been shooting weddings and portrait and travel stuff for many, many, many years. But let's talk about when you started. What got you into photography?
Actually, older brother was doing photography back in high school and had just an old traditional basic printer and started just doing some simple black and white. The cameras looked pretty archaic that I used to use, but they worked. When it comes down to it, photography, I think, is a very simple subject situation where it's aperture, shutter speed. It's more the creativity of the individual than it is the mechanics. So, yeah, I had some very simple cameras. I started back in high school, so we're talking 20 years ago that I started shooting film. I've had people comment, it's like, oh, the wonderful thing about digital is you know what you have when you shoot. It's like, well, I've been shooting film for 20-some-odd years. I know what I'm getting when I'm shooting it. I don't need to look at the back of a camera to find it.
Isn't that an interesting statement? And people always bring that up. It's like, okay, well, you're not confident in your own photography that you don't know what you just shot?
Exactly, yeah. And it's just, as a true photographer, typically I'm on the phone, and when I'm on the phone, I'm editing at the same time. And I go through imagery. My idea with it is, personally, my perspective is reality. Whether it's a travel photo, whether it's a wedding, family shot, I like reality. I think that's what photography, to me, is all about, capturing moments in time. Digital can do that, of course, but analog, I mean, my retouching that I do on imagery is extremely minimal, if at all. I think there are certain times when it's valuable, but I never use that as a crutch. I shoot the image according to what I believe is the best image that I can create at that moment. The retouching is for situations, say at a wedding, where you're shooting a beautiful shot of a bride during the ceremony and there's one hair that's going across her face. And you can't, of course, stop the ceremony at that point in time to adjust that. That's what retouching is for. But to me, I want people to relate to their imagery. I want people to relate to my imagery, whether if I'm shooting pictures in Africa. I want them to look at that and say, this was your moment, and this was the situation at that point in time, as opposed to doing a lot of post-production work. Because to me, that loses really the perspective that I enjoy of reality.
So what brought photography into the reality? So you started playing with this stuff when you were a kid, you're in high school. What got to the point that where Todd said, I think I want to do this for a living. This is just too cool.
Went to Stanford, economics degree. Had nothing to do with photography, of course. After college, I modeled for a number of years. During that time, doing photography at the same time, just on a novice basis, not on a professional level. What the modeling really did is expose me, first of all, to a lot of travel, a lot of different cultures, a lot of different situations, also opening my eyes up to a lot of different perspectives photography-wise. You're working with a lot of very, very talented people in the fashion industry. I think what I learned from that is really how to work with people when you're doing pose shots. But also realize working with people, even if they're not professional, is to let them be themselves. They can create imagery on their own through their interaction, through their movement, through their expression. And yes, you need to direct to some degree, but let them actually take it to their level, because that is what's going to make for a personal image. And again, I'll go back to relating to the imagery. Photographers, I think, can have their own vision on how to shoot somebody, how to photograph a couple. Rules, regulations, this is where you're supposed to have this person's face at this level and this person's face at that level. That's not the way I work. To me, it's very personal. And as a photographer, I want people to be as comfortable and as loose as possible, given the fact that most people are not necessarily in front of a camera most of the time. But giving them the opportunity to express themselves, because when it comes down to it, when they look back at those pictures, that is going to be a representation of their relationship and their personalities, and it's going to be much more personal than any preconceived idea that I could ever come up with. And so really working with them and letting them be themselves is really a critical part of what I try to do.
Well, I think so. I think if you look through your website and especially look at your wedding images, you can tell that most of these things aren't staged. This is real life. This is what was going on at the moment when you captured.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that you would classify yourself as a photojournalist, that you're trying to capture that moment of time as it happens? And how much mix do you put in? I know that you had mentioned that you do a little bit of staging, a little bit of direction. Or is this just mainly only for formals and so forth and so on? Otherwise, you just let it roll?
It's a very interesting question, something that's asked, and of course everyone's got a different perspective on the word photojournalism. I think you can be directing a shot and still have it being photojournalistic in the fact that you let people be themselves. I enjoy the combination of both, especially when you're considering weddings, because when it comes down to it, if there is one icon shot that I just got married just over a month ago.
Wow, congratulations.
Thanks so much. And if there's one picture that I'm going to put on a desk or on a website, etc., it's going to be the one picture that is set. It was a set shot. It just happens to be really nice light. The expressions are good. We're both in a camera. It works. Yeah, the silhouette shots, the artistic shots have their place within a wedding album. They tell part of the story. So to me, it's a combination of both. And I think what I enjoy doing is blending both set shots with photojournalism at the same time. And keeping in mind that even the set shots, if you choreograph them in a loose manner, in a very creative manner, they don't necessarily look like set shots. They look like moments that are happening, but everything just happens to be perfect. The light's perfect, the expressions are perfect, the background's exactly what you want, and those don't necessarily happen just naturally. So some directing, I think, is important for how I like to come across as far as doing the imagery. Group shots, of course, again, simplicity, I think, in so much of the imagery is the most critical thing. You really want to bring across whatever subject matter you're really trying to show the people that are viewing the imagery. So, for example, when I'm doing group shots, I want very simple backgrounds, nice light, nice expression, shoot very quickly. Shooting very quickly means that people are fresh, they're not bored. Also, you're working within a time frame, and it's really important to make very, very quick, important, and critical decisions off the cuff, because you don't have the luxury of spending 2 or 3 hours to get one shot. You have to take that group shot at the right time, at the right moment, and they're on to the reception, which is what they're there for, not the photography.
With your experience when shooting many, many weddings and all the stuff that you've done and what you have image-wise up on your website, and what you know as a newlywed, and secondary as what you know your brides want, what do you find that what's a bride really looking for when it comes to images that portray their day? Because what's going through their head, most of the stuff they don't remember because it's just a blur. So whatever you can get, great, but what do they think in their head? And I guess this comes back, I think, to the whole theory of the fairy tale thing and the Cinderella deal and the wedding. How do brides think that they need to be conveyed when there's a photograph taken, and how can you be able to get what you think they want?
Actually, it was really eye-opening. I've probably shot 1,500 weddings or so over the years, and as many as I've done, and I'm very fortunate in the fact that, first of all, I really enjoy doing them, and the feedback I've received is very positive, because I think as a photographer, what I do is I show my clients what I do. So they get a very, very good idea of what I do before I'm actually shooting their event. Now, of course, every event is very different and individual, so the imagery itself will be very personal to their situation, but the overall style will remain the same. But not too long ago, talking to my wife, I mean, there's certain shots. It is about the bride and groom. Yes, the storyline is important, but the storyline really revolves around them. And getting some of those, as I mentioned before, icon shots, beautiful shots of the bride. Getting ready shots, I think, are great interactive moments. They incorporate special people in their lives. Those are priceless moments. So the photojournalism works in that situation. Whereas I talked about modeling, being able to set shots that are not your typical, and nothing wrong with it, but sometimes you look at wedding pictures or wedding portraits and they look like wedding portraits. Being able to do those set shots with more of a fashion edge to them, as opposed to something that you would just look at and go, okay, that's a decent shot. Or something that people look at and they say, you know what, that looks like a magazine shot. That looks like something that would be in an ad. That's my perspective, and I think that's what a lot of people are looking for, in the fact that this is a time in their life where people don't generally take time to get their hair and makeup done. They don't take time to get really, really professional imagery taken. And a wedding is a great excuse to actually, at one point in their life, to do so. And I think it's a great time as a photographer and a really important time, and that's how seriously I take my situation, and the fact that these images that I'm taking could be the only professional pictures that this couple may ever have. Or I've had a number of situations where parents' pictures with the bride and groom, it's really the only family shot that they may ever take, especially when they're all done up and looking good and everything else. So it's really critical to make sure that you get both the photojournalistic perspective as well as, like I said, the set shots done still creatively, but that are more representative of the couple and the families themselves.
And like you said, there's only really one shot is going to make it in the frame on the mantle somewhere. Everything else is going to go in a book, and that's great. Typically, people don't have multiple wedding shots around the house. They probably do for a while. I'm sure you still do. But I'm sure eventually it'll get toned down to where there's like one image that just sort of hangs out forever, okay? And if you look at Western society, specifically you're in San Francisco Bay Area, so maybe it's a little bit different than what you'd find on the East Coast, and definitely different in Asia. But if you looked at what really was displayed this year at Imaging USA, they have their former little portrait category for the wedding things. And all the wedding pictures from the West Coast and even more so most of the American photographers were, like you said, more stylistic, more fashion, more high fashion. But it's really interesting that all the ones that were traditional were Asian. And they were very, extremely extravagant, beautiful stuff. The very Cinderella-esque type images of them sitting on really exquisite Victorian-type furniture and this very, very formal bridal portrait that you don't see typically being done anymore, but you still see this with the Asian communities. It's a very important thing, and I think that touches off on what you said in regards to this is probably the only time or one of the only times that they might have this chance to get this real professional image. So it's interesting to see what the Asian culture has in regards to what they consider the formal portrait and what you see of the bride versus what's being done in the U.S. and around that's westernized.
Yeah, well, I think the biggest difference, again, is perspective on style. What I see with a lot of the books that I see are done in Taiwan and Hong Kong, etc., they're highly styled. You have people in different outfits with different props. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just a very different perspective. To me, imagery is a slice of life. To me, I want people to look back at whatever image, whether it's a family shot, travel, photography, wedding. I want people to look back and say, this was a moment in time, and this was us. Not a overly contrived situation. It's not really representative of them. To me, as you look back at some of the pictures of my parents, my grandparents, just some of the most simple images, I think, are some of the most powerful. It could be a simple snapshot on a vacation, but it just really shows a point in time in their life that without that image being captured, it's gone, especially when talking several generations down the line. And to me, being able to get to know your family members, whether they've passed away way before you were even here, is a great way of learning about the family. And it opens up also a lot of conversation. I mean, without a lot of that imagery, the conversations never really come up, and you don't really get to know some of the people that came before you. And those people that came before you may, whether they're in your life or not, may be influencing your life now somehow or another. And I think the imagery itself is really important to be able to have, whether it's a simple snapshot or a professional picture, something that's representative of that individual is really important.
Do you ever suggest to your bridal clients that, hey, let's get you all dressed up after the fact or before, and let's go somewhere in San Francisco in the city and do some fashions and some really edgy stuff?
Not generally. Unless somebody's really looking to do that, I feel that within the parameters that I'm given on a wedding day that I can get plenty of stuff. I tell people I can take pictures in a bathroom. If you're creative enough and you understand the individuals you're working with, you can take pictures anywhere. And to me, those are much more personal. For example, I have clients that sometimes will ask about doing engagement photos, which I really enjoy doing. And they say, oh, should we bring several different outfits? We'll change this to this to this. And I say, my perspective is I want the imagery to look like you happen to be at the beach on one day, and there was a photographer there taking pictures of you. The clothing doesn't make the difference. It's important. The background's important, but it's about you. So my idea is that keep it consistent. So as people look through this imagery, it doesn't look like it's a contrived fashion shoot. It looks like, hey, this was a day we took some photographs, and this is about us. Not about the wardrobe, not about throwing the Golden Gate Bridge in the background. There's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes you do some icon shots where you have that, but it's about the couple and their relationship. That's, to me, much more important than trying to do a different day, do a different situation. Now, if you want to do something totally separate, something, for example, my wife and I, if we want to do something a little edgier, fine. But when it comes down to it, the pictures that, to me, are going to be so much more personal are the ones on the wedding day, just because it is a reminder of a day that was in itself and just bringing us back to those certain moments.
Sure. Let's get a little geeky now. Let's talk about, to start with, gear. What are you shooting with?
I'm actually not on the cutting edge of technology as far as gear. My idea with photography equipment, computers, everything else is get what you need for now. Everything's always going to be upgraded and change. So look 6 months, a year out. Get the equipment you need at this point in time. I use all Canon.
Right.
I use 5Ds for my digital and then EOS 1Ns for the film. I actually shoot with multiple cameras at a time. So even though it sounds a little unusual, but a lot of times I'm shooting with 4 cameras at a time. It's a little unusual, but I also like to be able to have the flexibility of using different lenses at any moment. And I'm sure you've been through this where if you don't have all the cameras on you and all the lenses on you, to switch a lens takes too long. You don't have that luxury. The bride's walking down the aisle. You want to use a long lens, do a close-up shot of her, get her expression. She walks past you. You want to get a wide-angle lens, everyone looking at her, use a high-speed film possibly. You need all those lenses, all those cameras on you immediately, even though I work with 1 or 2 assistants on every event. You don't have the time or the luxury.
No. I mean, yeah, you need at least 2 or 3 bodies on you. At least that's my theory, too.
So I'm shooting with film and digital, and sometimes I'll use digital simply as a backup. I have really never had a problem with any film situation, but just peace of mind knowing that I have backup with digital as well as film, it's just a good idea. Some of the horror stories I've heard is when people shoot all digital, and of course they're looking at the back of their camera. They think they have everything, and they have a corrupt file or whatever, and they go to download, and it's gone. And you need to be backing up with several different cameras, I believe, to make sure that no matter what the situation is, that the imagery is not only taken creatively and well, but also making sure that you have it backed up with different ways to go forward, so you make sure that you don't run into a situation where you're not providing your client with the images they need.
Sure. Let's talk about glass. You're going to have 2 or 3 bodies on you, 4 bodies, maybe 1 digital, a bunch of 1V, 1Ns. What do you like to shoot glass-wise? You shooting all prime? What's your story there?
I use all different zoom lenses. So 17 to 35, 24 to 70, 70 to 200, and it's all Canon.
So 3 pieces of glass and you're covered, boom.
Yep.
3 film bodies and then 1 digital.
Yeah. And usually the second digital is another 28 to 70, just for kind of a medium range.
So if you look at a lot of the images on your website are black and white. There's some great color stuff too. Let's talk about analog acquisition. What's your favorite emulsion? What are you shooting with film-wise?
It's all Kodak. I shoot mostly Portra on the color. I don't switch around speeds a lot. I usually shoot with a 400. High-speed film, I shoot a T-Max 3200, and then with the black and white, 400 TX. But again, all Kodak.
So then your black and white is true black and white. You're not using BW400CN, C41
exactly.
Black and white. You're using real black and white.
Exactly. And one of my favorite is the Portra 400, the NC 220 film. I just really, really like the skin tones, the saturation level. It's got the punch, but it's also forgiving as far as skin tones. So it's one of my favorite. When I look through my imagery, that's one of the things, even the Portra 35mm is great, but the 220, the medium format, it's just got a real good feel to it.
So what are you shooting with medium format gear?
Oh, Contax.
645.
Yeah.
I love that camera. I have one.
Yeah, I have 2 of them. I've been using them for years. Love it.
What are you shooting most of the time? 80, 120? What are you shooting glass-wise?
Combination of the fixed lenses. I actually go from wide angle to 120.
Oh, you got the whole kit. You're ready to rock and roll.
Yeah. I don't use the wide angle a lot for the contacts, just if say I'm in a group shot situation where I'm really confined as far as space. But usually it's 120.
Beautiful. When you're shooting the Portra 400NC, do you shoot the stuff straight up? Are you shooting it at 320, 200? Are you overexposing it?
I overexpose it slightly. So if I'm metering, I'll generally, even though it's rated at 400, I may shoot it at 320, somewhere in that range.
Because I know that Kodak typically doesn't like to be overexposed as much as Fuji. Fuji likes a stop or two.
I feel very comfortable with it slightly overexposed.
A little more creamier, softer colors.
Exactly, especially for the weddings. Now, generally when I do travel photography, I'll go for the VC, where it's a little more saturated, just for a little bit more punch. But usually when I'm looking at weddings, skin tones are the most critical thing, and so the NC works really well.
So let's say if Todd is going to go on vacation, you're going to go back to Morocco, or you're going to go somewhere cool. You only have one camera. What are you taking?
Oh, I wouldn't go with one camera. I just couldn't. I have a friend of mine that was a photographer that went to, I think, India, and he said he just didn't bring a camera. I'm like, how did you do that? I would be just jumping in my seat. On the other hand, as a photographer, you also got to realize there's life, and you need to enjoy your life and not look through a lens all the time. But I think one of the beautiful things about photography is it just opens your eyes up to everything. It's a simple shadow. It's a person walking across the street. You notice all these little details that are so easy to miss through life if you're not looking at it as an image. Now, that doesn't mean you necessarily have to take an image of it, but it's in your mind and you have it. So I appreciate photographers that will go on vacation and just not bring a camera.
I don't see how.
It's tough. For example, if I go fly fishing, I have to break it off. First of all, I'm immersed in water most of the time. And even though if I put everything kind of in a dry bag, it's not really a cool idea to have a really expensive camera on you. Because when I'm fly fishing, it's like photography. I'm totally immersed in what I'm doing. And to do both is actually difficult. If I'm driving down the road in a car and I see a great image, great. But if I'm actually fly fishing, I'm fly fishing. And that's my goal, and that's my vision at that point in time. To try to do both at the same time is a little difficult. Where most things, when I'm traveling, the cameras are on me, and I always bring a contacts, no matter what. If I just had to choose one, that would be it. It's a little slower process. It's not for some of the photojournalistic shots that just happen in an instant. You may not get as much of that, but on the other hand, your end result for the pictures that are really critical, having the contacts, is wonderful. I just love the tone. I love the depth of field. I love the feel of the camera.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, that body with an 80 Zeiss, I mean, you can't go wrong. Pretty good travel piece. Let's talk about your workflow. So you do this great capture, no matter if you're in Panama or you're doing a wedding. You've got all this film. What do you do next? Where does it go?
The film itself, I have processed at Richard Photo Lab.
Yep.
Send that down to them. They process it, scan it, and do 4x6 prints on everything. Fairly reasonable price. I like to present my clients not only with digital files. I like them to have 4x6 prints. The reason for that, I think, twofold. One is there are certain times when it's just nice to look at a physical print. Say you're in a group of 10 people and you're at a party. For everyone to go up and look at your laptop can be a little awkward. Secondly, a print, of course, is going to look different from something on a computer screen.
Well, I mean, really, you don't have a photograph until you have a print. So how can you give your clients a photograph if you don't give them a print? You can't look at it unless you can hold it in your hand, right?
Yep. It would be really funny to me to just hand people a disc and say, here's your wedding. I want them to have a physical print. They're provided with a 4x6 print, so it gives them a physical representation. Everyone's business model is very different. I give people access to the imagery as far as the discs, the prints. If they want to do printing on their own, they can.
What about the negs?
They can get them anytime.
Really? Do you hold them as more of a safekeeping deal? Or if they want them right then, you can say, hey, here's your negs.
Generally, most of my clients will have me keep them on file, at least on a short-term basis before they do all the printing. Because what I would hate to have happen is, even though it's their responsibility once I give them to them, but what happens if they don't put them in the right place? What happens if they put them in a place that's not conducive to really keeping the negative in good condition? It's too hot, it's too wet, whatever else may be. So I like to take that responsibility until at least they get a number of prints done or their book done, so they have that done. And of course, now the wonderful thing again is we have the digital files, so no matter what happens in negatives, we still have the digital files to work with. So it's always a wonderful backup to have that. So my idea is I like to be able to take care of people through the entire process, meaning not only provide excellent imagery, but also to take care of their books, take care of any printing that they want to do. I basically have the prints done at cost through Richard Photos, so good quality, but also very affordable. To me, you got to realize that, yes, I know people start with look at it as like, oh, this is my artistry, this is my artwork. But keep in mind that you may be taking a picture of a couple of the bride and groom's friends dancing. They don't need a $50 print. A 4x6, $2 print put up on the refrigerator is fine. So to me, having the flexibility of being able to use the imagery for the purpose that makes sense for the individuals that are wanting that image makes a lot more sense than, again, my preconceived idea on, you have to do a fiber-based print on this picture. No, you don't. Some of the imagery is just for fun, just for documentary, just throw in a little frame that may be a 2x3 something that they put on their desk. So to me, I want people to be able to use the imagery and enjoy the imagery, whether it's on a website, whether it's on Facebook now, or slideshow, whatever it may be. That's, I think, really the big advantage now, the opportunities that people have to be able to share imagery. Like I said before, it was traditionally just a wedding book. Now there's just so many different ways of being able to share great imagery. For example, my travel photography, I don't need to send people 200 pictures from Africa. They don't need that. This way they can look on my website, or if I do a slideshow, they can see my experience of Africa without the expense and at their own convenience, as opposed to me sending a bunch of imagery to them that they don't necessarily want to keep. The world has changed considerably as far as the usage, and I think it's wonderful because people have so many different options as far as sharing their experiences.
What's your typical acquisition at a wedding? So do you shoot 50 rolls of film and a couple thousand digital images? How's that work? And then what do you deliver to the client? Do they actually get to see?
Great question. I would say on an average, of course, every event is different. I do some weddings where literally it's 2 people at the beach with an officiant, and that's it. Obviously, that's going to be a total volume-wise as far as imagery considerably less than some weddings that I've done that are upwards of 1,000 people. Generally, you're looking at somewhere around 1,200 to 1,500 film images and probably about the same digital. Where I pick up a lot of the digital imagery, as I kind of alluded to earlier, is a little less critical imagery, meaning, for example, if I'm doing a traditional Chinese wedding, the bride and groom go and toast each table. Now, I've shot so many Chinese weddings, and when it comes down to the wedding book, they almost never use any of those pictures that they're toasting the tables. But they're fun shots to have, and I think part of my job to document those situations. And some of them can be really fun and very interactive. So in certain situations like that, I may gravitate more towards shooting digital for that. And I also use off-camera flashes, and I do some different things with flash units that having a digital gives me a little more flexibility, almost like having an instant Polaroid, so that I can see exactly how, if I have 2 or 3 off-camera flashes, how they're interacting, whereas, of course, with film, you just don't know. Where if I'm shooting portraits and stuff like that, I know exactly what's happening with a film. But when you're doing multiple flashes, they may interact differently in every different situation, because it's a very fluid moment as they're walking around tables or interacting with people. So those times, I think digital can actually be extremely valuable. So most of my clients are looking around 2,000 to 3,000 images, 4x6 prints on all the film shots, and generally those are provided within about 3 weeks.
Wow, pretty good.
I try to get it back as soon as possible, because what I don't want to do is have somebody call me up and say, we're just wondering how the pictures are going. I want to call them first, because I do such a varied array of different events, whether it's weddings and fashion and corporate, etc. There's always so much work going on that, to me, the most important thing is to continue to keep the flow and not think, I can get to that next week. I know, for example, again, getting married recently, I wanted to see the pictures as soon as possible.
Do you give any digital ones right away, like here's an email the next day for your honeymoon, here's a couple pictures? Or is it you get to wait till the film comes back, have a great honeymoon, talk to you in a few weeks?
I mean, I could do that. I know some photographers that show imagery as they're shooting it. I don't go that perspective. I know some people, and again, nothing wrong with this, that do slideshows from the ceremony of the wedding at the reception. To me, I want the guests, I want the bride and groom to be in the moment that they're in and not to be viewing imagery. There's time for imagery later. And that's what the imagery is for, is to remember those certain moments and to bring you back to that certain point in time. The reception should be involved with other people, not looking basically at a computer screen or TV. They should be involved with the guests. They should be involved with the situation that's happening, because, again, those are creating more images. Those are creating more moments, as opposed to reviewing moments that could be reviewed later that makes a lot more sense. So I would generally have the couple wait to see stuff. Even if I'm shooting some stuff digitally, we're always on a time basis. Whether a couple sees each other 3 hours before the ceremony or they don't see each other at all before the ceremony, When I have people in front of a camera, my perspective is these images need to be taken as quickly as possible. That's what keeps the spontaneity. That's what keeps it natural and comfortable. These images are extremely important, but they can be viewed at a later date, and that's what they're for, not for the day itself.
With your packages, do you include an album, or is it here's the base photography, you get your proofs, you get your digital files, and then you can do a book later? How do you work your program? I know a lot of people anymore are like, okay, well, you're going to pay for my services and your proofs, and then we'll talk about the book at a later date.
I do it a la carte. To answer that is, to me, everyone's needs are so individual. I was just talking with a client today. They did 4 books. They did one for the bride and groom, of course, and they did one for each parent, and they did 5 books, 2 grandparent books. Not everyone does that. To try to package that would, to me, be impossible. I mean, you don't know what people are going to need, and they don't even know what they're going to need until they see the images. So what I generally do is I want to be there for them for any help that they need as far as post-production. I have people who say, well, I want to do a print for my house. They may even email me over what the room looks like. And I may say, well, you may want to do a 16 by 20. You've got a very open space. Most people are probably 10 feet away from the image as they look at it, so you may want to do a very large image. Or it may be a hallway where the people are 6 inches away from the print. You're not going to want to do a 16 by 20 print. It's just hard to look at from that distance. So my idea is I want to carry them through the entire process, and that could be books, it could be individual prints, whatever it may be. But it is done a la carte because, again, everyone's needs are so different. Also because I'm not making money on the printing, that gives the availability for the client to do printing on their own. I had a client that I did an Indian wedding where they literally, from the digital files, they went and made some prints at Costco. Because of the 5D and everything in imagery, the pictures look great. That's something they wanted to do, go for it.
Hey, they paid you, whatever.
Yeah. Again, they should have the flexibility to do so. To me, again, it's your artwork as a photographer. It's your job. It's what you do, but you get paid to do it. And bottom line is it's their wedding. And to me, it's really their imagery. To be able to have the flexibility to use the pictures as they like is important. And if there's any way I can help, I'm more than happy to do so. But if there's some things that they feel like they just want to get a 4x6 print done, throw it on the refrigerator in a little frame, go for it.
It sounds like your economics background. I mean, when you talk about that, because you talk to a lot of photographers like, no way, you're not going to get the files, you're not going to do this, you got to get a book, you got to do that. You're like, hey, you paid me, it's your deal, go for it. It's great.
On the other hand, what I don't want anyone to feel is that I'm just kind of leaving them out to dry, hanging them out there and saying, okay, well, I'm done, because I'm not. The post-production work is extremely important to make sure that they're handled well in getting the product that they want and the product that they've seen from me beforehand. They look at my wedding books. I have a few different style of wedding books that I work with. So that is part of what I would say, if you want to call anything a package, that is part of the package. It is not only providing really good imagery, but it's also making sure that they are able to use the images in a way that is effective for their purposes.
When you get the stuff back from Brian and the guys over at Richard Photo Lab, how much work are you doing in Photoshop?
Very little.
Really?
I don't see the need for it most of the time.
Are you having your stuff scanned on the Noritsu scanner or the Fuji scanner?
I think it's a Noritsu.
Wow.
But I would have to talk to Michael about that. Post-production, I see so few times that you need it. I think if you're shooting correctly, you don't need to. So post-production, I've had situations where life happens, and I've had situations where all of a sudden somebody that was in a group shot is no longer part of that family. We've literally taken them completely out of the shot, put somebody else in the shot. We can do anything you want. But that, to me, should be done on just a very minimal basis. Because I think, again, most of the time you should be able to take the picture as you like. Again, to me, identifying and being realistic with the imagery, I think is the most important thing. People identify with the imagery and look at their event and say, this is our event. This is not a post-production Photoshop version of my wedding or my persona. It's reality, and this is us. And I think that's kind of the old slippery slope thing where people start getting involved in photoshopping and photoshopping everything and looking at that as part of the way they shoot. I look at it as a totally separate situation. I shoot to shoot what I want as I see it. If there happens to be a situation afterwards where there needs to be some slight touch-ups, look at it that way as opposed to part of your photography process. Now, I think that's very different. I think especially a lot of the younger photographers, again, nothing wrong with it, but they shoot to Photoshop. That is really their thought process, is I'll shoot this and I'll retouch everything. To me, that's fine, but it's just not the way I perceive life. I don't perceive photography on a computer. I see it through the lens.
I think they should be given a film camera and chrome and say, you nail it on chrome, then you can have a digital camera.
There you go. Learn that way first. And we're very fortunate in being a little bit older that we've had the opportunity to learn from that. And I think that, of course, can translate definitely over to digital imagery as well. But when it comes down to it, I mean, the basics are the basics. It's light, composition, and using aperture, shutter speed. And so the basics are there. It's just how you use them. And there's different ways of capturing them, but when it comes down to it, it's really the eye of the photographer that makes the image, not the technology.
You ever shot a wedding on chrome?
I have not.
Do you shoot aperture priority? Do you let the camera meter, or do you carry your own hand meter, or do you just go manual and your eye can tell what it needs to be?
Kind of a combination of both. With the contacts, even though it does have an internal meter, I always use an external meter. I generally shoot on aperture mode with the 35mm cameras. Reason being, that's, to me, the most critical thing. Knowing my depth of field is how I want to shoot, and then shutter speed comes after that, of course. It's a combination of both, but that's the priority I put it on.
Do you like to shoot wide open, or do you want to be able to control the depth of field and get a little bit more depth there?
Totally depends on the situation. I vary it all the time. Yeah. I mean, a lot of times I'm 2.8 or 4.0. Other times I'm doing group shots, it's 8 or 11. So I'll change that up according to the situation.
Very, very cool. So tell me here one thing before we go that you haven't got to do photographically that you want to do. I know you've been all around the world. You've even been to communist places like Cuba. I don't know how you got in, but that was cool. Great photograph.
And it was legal.
Was it?
Yeah, I wouldn't feel comfortable putting stuff up there if it was not done legally. So yeah, I actually had a permit to go.
Wow, that's great. Well, hopefully it'll be open up here pretty soon.
Gosh, there's so much more to be seen. I want to go back there. I actually want to go back there before it does open up, because like anything else, it's going to change if it does.
Well, once it opens up, it's going to be just one big tourist pit.
It will, and it's such a unique situation. Exciting, sad at the same time. If you can actually talk to a lot of the Cubans, even though they're a fairly happy lot on the outside, it's a tough life.
Sure.
Tough life for them, and I would love to see some changes happen, not to get political, but hopefully at some point in time they can find their way to a point where they can live more comfortably.
Well, I think the commies aren't going to last forever like everywhere else. So, photographically, what do you want to do? What's your big challenge you haven't done yet? Do you want to go shoot 4x5 portraits? I mean, what do you want to do that you haven't got a chance to shoot and do yet?
One of my biggest passions is travel photography. Just to be able to travel and experience different cultures, people, locations. That's really what I'm looking for. I try to do that every year. But as much as I've been blessed in the fact that I've been able to travel as much as I have, there are so many different locations that I haven't been to, and so many different experiences that I have not experienced yet. So my wife's father's from Malaysia, and very close to where we're traveling, it's one of the premier diving locations. I'm not a diver. I'm really not that good in the water. But even the aspect of expanding into doing underwater photography, things like that that are just within the photography realm, but just different avenues and experiences. Because I think from anything you photograph, and I don't care if it's a simple family shoot, to a wedding, to shooting in Africa, you learn from every single experience that you get. And to me, if I can expand even to underwater photography, that will not only give me imagery and moments to remember, but also will expand my learning experience and my vision as far as photography. So to me, it's just getting more and more and more experiences. A number of years ago, I talked to a bride that said, I want to work with a photographer that only shoots one wedding a weekend and is very limited as far as how much they shoot. And I said, I was already booked on a day. And I said, well, that's an interesting perspective, but keep in mind that it's like anything else. You bring all your experiences to the table. And the more experiences you have, I think the more well-rounded and the more intuitive and the better you're going to be at your job.
Yeah.
So to me, to have just more experiences is what I look for. And the more diverse situations, the better. And even when you travel, you're talking about every culture is so different. How do you relate to them, especially if you don't speak their language? As a photographer, it can be somewhat intrusive. How do you approach people? That will also teach you how to approach people, say you're at a wedding. People are used to being photographed at a wedding. You speak the same language. But how you approach them, you've learned through so many different experiences through your travel and relating to so many different cultures and people, you will approach them differently and in a way that I think will be much more comforting to them. And so just the more diverse and the more opportunities I have to photograph in different situations, the better.
Yeah, this is great stuff. Beautiful photography, Todd, and I do appreciate you joining us today. Just beautiful work you're doing, and really cool to see that you're capturing these great images on film and that you're just keeping analog photography alive, and it's just great, beautiful photography.
I really appreciate it, and thanks so much for the time and the discussion. Yeah, it's a wonderful job. It's a great opportunity, and I wouldn't trade it for the world.
And we definitely look forward to having you back on to talk about some more of your travel photography, because like you said, people really need to go to your website and look at what you're doing, because you have some just beautiful, stunning images up there from basically all over the globe. Pretty cool. I just haven't seen that you haven't made it over to a lot of European trips yet.
You know why?
Why?
Because I'm so busy during summer.
Right.
Even as much as I typically go south of the border, south of the equator during winter, because my summer months are just so busy that I can't get away.
Wow.
I love Europe, and I've been over there a number of times, unless I want to go there during middle of winter, which is fine. But it's really more a matter of workload and making sure that I'm taking care of my clients here. So usually my travel experiences are, like I said, south of the equator sometime during winter.
No, well, like you said, you'll get a chance to get over there and shoot Prague. It'll be cool.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Todd, thanks so much for joining us. We look forward to having you back on today. Give everybody your website address so they can go check out your beautiful work.
Yes, it's www.toddrafalovich.com. That's TODDRAFALOVICH.com.
Todd, great stuff. I appreciate it, buddy, and we'll talk real soon.
Thanks for the conversation.
Well, there you go. Todd Rafalovich. Great photography coming out of Todd's studio. Beautiful work, portrait, lifestyle photography, wedding. But you know what the key thing is? It's analog. Things that really matter with Todd are images that are captured on film. Great stuff. Check out his website, Beautiful Photography. The Inside Analog Photography radio program has been brought to you by Fujifilm, making life more colorful over at www.fujifilmusa.com. Our friends at Richard Photo Lab at richardphotolab.com. DR5 over at www.dr5.com. Iger Studios over at igerstudios.com. Upstrap at upstrap-pro.com. And of course, our media partners, APUG, the Analog Photography User Group over at www.apug.org. Our photography philanthropy partners, George Eastman House International Museum of Photography and Film over at www.geh.org. I've been your host, Scott Shepard, here on Inside Analog Photography Radio. We'll be back next week with more great analog photography.